and welcome to the Lifestyle Refresh podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so excited to have you here. This is a space where we explore what it really means to live a balanced, healthy, and fulfilled life through fitness, mindfulness, resilience, and everything in between. I created this podcast to share with you my journey, all the ups and downs, and the lessons I've learned along the way. My hope is that it inspires you to show up for yourself no matter where you're starting from. Each episode will dive into topics that will help you refresh your mindset, habits, and lifestyle so that you can step into the best version of yourself. I'm so glad you're here to join me on this journey. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lifestyle Refresh Podcast. I know it's been a couple weeks since my last episode, and I wanted to be really honest about why. At first, I didn't have really another idea for a next episode. I had a couple lined up, but didn't have my heart into getting into recording them yet. I just wasn't fully invested into that episode. And I did have a lot of personal things coming up and things going on in my life, so my week off spiraled into a few weeks off. But I told myself I would wait until something really inspired me. And then, of course, the ideas started coming, but the next week got really busy, and then before I knew it, I'd skipped a couple weeks. And normally, that would really mess with me. I made a promise to myself to show up weekly, and in the past, I would have really beaten myself up over not sticking to that schedule. But instead, I challenged myself to let go of that pressure and just trust that when I did sit down to record, it would be the right time. This might seem small, but for me, this was a huge step in my journey of letting go of perfectionism. Because if there's one thing I know about myself, it's that I've always had this rigid mindset around doing things right, showing up exactly how I planned, holding myself to these high, almost impossible standards. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. What it means to be a recovering perfectionist. I don't know why I love calling it that, but we're sticking with it. Recovering perfectionist. One of the coolest things about doing this podcast is how much I'm learning in the process. I'm making all these huge connections about my own personal growth and development. Things I thought I understood, but now I'm seeing them in a whole new way. And recently, I made a big realization about perfectionism that I think is going to resonate with a lot of you. I'm talking about a little connection with perfectionism and critical environments. I always thought my perfectionism was just a personality trait. Like, I like structure, I like things done well, I liked to be in control, which is all true. But recently, I had this little light bulb moment. What if perfectionism doesn't come from within? What if it actually comes from being surrounded by critical people? When you grow up around people, whether it's family, teachers, coaches, or even just the world in general, who constantly point out flaws or hold you to impossible standards, or make you feel like you always have to prove yourself, you start to internalize that. It's not just about wanting to do things well, it becomes about avoiding failure at all costs. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that mistakes equal not being good enough. Can you relate to that? Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply connected perfectionism and people pleasing are. For so many of us, perfectionism isn't even about our own standards. It's about trying to meet the expectations of others, trying to avoid judgment, trying to be good enough in the eyes of the people around us. And when you've spent your life in that circle, it's really hard to break free from. So, how do you break the cycle? One of the biggest shifts for me has been realizing that the most critical people in our lives, they're often dealing with their own insecurities. Their judgments don't define you. And more importantly, you don't have to live your life trying to meet someone else's impossible standards. And before we dive any deeper into this, I do want to share something important because when I talk about being around critical people and how that can fuel perfectionist tendencies, I want it to be known that I am not here to cast any blame or to be negative towards any specific individual or to be anything negative towards those individuals. In my experience, like I had said, many people who come off as overly critical are often dealing with their own insecurities and struggles. Again, we're all going through stuff. So be mindful of that too. My goal is simply to raise more awareness about how these external voices, whether from family, friends, or society, they can shape our internal narrative and push us towards perfectionism. Recognizing this isn't about vilifying anyone, it's about understanding the dynamics at play so we can better navigate them and ultimately be kinder to ourselves. By becoming more aware of these influences, we empower ourselves to respond with more compassion and to choose progress over the pressure of perfection. So, how do you heal from external criticism? If this is hitting home for you, here's something to ask yourself: whose voice is in my head when I feel like I'm not doing enough? Is it actually my voice, or is it something I was taught to believe? Because once you start questioning it, you can start rewriting your own definition of success, one that actually feels good for you. All right, well, now that we understand where perfectionism might be coming from, let's talk about how it actually shows up in our lives. For me, it looked like just obsessing over every detail of every outcome that I'm looking at in my life. I would have this end picture of how it should look. And if it wasn't that end picture to a T, it would bother me. And it would just be so many minuscule details added up come the end of it that it holds you back. But there's fear of failure and procrastination, so the illusion of control. So how do we move past perfectionism? For me, it started with realizing that perfectionism wasn't actually helping me. It was holding me back. I just recently started to look at it as a negative flaw. I always thought it was a good thing. It meant like I had high standards, that I worked hard, and that I cared about what I was doing. And while some of that is true, perfectionism also made me afraid to fail, made me hesitate to try new things if I wasn't sure I'd be good at them, it made me overthink, overwork, and second guess myself. Once I saw how much it was keeping me stuck, I knew I had to change. And trust me, it's not like one day I just woke up and stopped becoming a perfectionist. It's been a process. And honestly, it's been tough. And it still is tough. But shifting out of that mindset has been one of the most freeing things I've ever done for myself. So, your first step, letting go of the idea that I have to get everything right to move forward. I started asking myself, what would happen if I just started instead of overthinking it? I just did it. And when I did that, I realized that the world didn't fall apart when things weren't perfect. In fact, they usually turned out just fine, sometimes even better than if I had obsessed over them. Even better. So these things are holding us back, these beliefs that we're telling ourselves. Perfectionism, it's shifting your mindset. Perfectionism tells us that we have to meet a certain standard to be worthy. But the truth is, we're already worthy. And if we can start to shift our focus from perfect to progress, we give ourselves permission to actually live, to try, to learn, to grow. So if you're listening to this thinking, yep, this is me, let's talk about what actually helps. Because it's not enough to just want to change. We need to actively rewire the way we think. Here are a few things that have made a huge difference for me: mindfulness and self compassion. This one was tough for me at first. I was so used to pushing myself so hard that being kind to myself felt uncomfortable. But perfectionism thrives on self criticism. And if we want to break free from it, we have to replace that criticism with compassion. So when I catch myself spiraling into, I should have done this better, or that wasn't good enough, I pause and ask, what would I say? Would I say this to a friend? And if the answer is no, then I change the narrative. And then you have to break things down. Perfectionists tend to look at the big picture and feel completely overwhelmed. Like, we don't want to just start a workout routine. We want to have the perfect plan, perfect consistency, perfect execution. And when we can't meet that impossible standard, we quit. Instead, I've learned to focus on just the next step, not the perfect plan, not the entire journey, just one small step forward. The small steps are such a huge win. And speaking of wins, we're gonna celebrate them. Celebrate the small wins. Something that used to frustrate me was feeling like nothing was ever enough. I'd accomplish something, But instead of feeling good about it, I'd immediately just move on to the next thing. Now, I make it a point to actually pause and celebrate, even if it's just acknowledging something that's happened and calling it out loud. Hey, I showed up today. That counts. We don't realize how much recognizing those small wins helps you. It keeps me motivated, helps me appreciate my progress. And the energy just flows from that, I feel like, when you celebrate that stuff and you call it out and you recognize it. It's just bringing more positivity into the air and back to you. But our last one, letting people in. Because when you tend to live in perfectionism, it can be isolating because we don't want people to see us struggle. We try so hard to do everything alone. But the more I've tried to open up about my struggles, the more I've realized that everyone has them. And letting people in, whether it's friends, mentors, just people you trust, it's made the journey so much easier for me. But we're going to talk about the benefits of letting go. So, what actually happens when you start letting go of perfectionism? For me, it's meant more for freedom to try new things without fear, freedom to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes, freedom to actually enjoy the process instead of obsessing over the outcome. When we have less stress, there's more room for creativity. When I stopped trying to do everything right, I actually became more creative. I had more energy. I had more fun. Instead of feeling burnt out, I started feeling actually inspired again. I've picked up so many more projects and I've done so many more little side that because I don't, the inspiration and the creativity has just come with letting go of that obsessiveness to be perfect. And I've built more confidence in myself. Ironically, I used to think that perfectionism was what gave me confidence. But really, it was making me doubt myself constantly. So once I let go of that pressure, I realized confidence doesn't come from getting everything perfect. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever happens because you're open to whatever could happen. You've let go of that fear. And you get more joy in your everyday life. Because honestly, I feel so much lighter when you're constantly holding yourself to these impossible standards. It's exhausting. But when you let go of that, you make space for joy, for play, for actually living. And I get it. And I know it's so hard to let go and move past that kind of picture. If you have this built in picture of how it's supposed to look and be structured, like one area that I've really had to let go of my perfectionism in is my fitness routine. And it's hard because I'm a fitness trainer, I'm a coach. I fell and I became that because I fell in love with fitness so much and how important it is to be healthy and exercise and take care of yourself. My routine was very important to me. I had worked so hard on building the perfect lifting schedule and routine for me. But throughout the years now, because I've had this now kind of baseline habit of attending and going and working out regularly, that's natural for me now. So I'd worked so hard on building this specific routine to build my goal body, my goal physique, my goal, what, all of muscle, everything I was looking for, whatever my fitness goals, life seemed to keep getting in the way. So I couldn't hold that perfect routine. And that was hard for me to keep in the habit of that, but also keep rolling with everyday life because life doesn't stop in these moments. You have all this other stuff going on behind the scenes. So when you're focusing so hard on one area, going a certain way, it's going to drive you insane. So you have to give yourself grace. You have to let back and lean in to the trust of it will all work out. You can figure it out. You can reset and refresh your goals and your routine, your schedule, and figure out where you can get things in. But with embracing this lifestyle, it's forced me to really call out my perfectionism and how often and how many day to day life areas it shows up in, and to really push past that. Now I don't stress about going to the gym or skipping a days or a week here and there. I move my body and I've built myself basic routines that align with what I'm trying to do for myself. And guess what? I still look the same. I still feel great. No, I'm not in the gym lifting for hours and getting that did a lot of other things for me. So as much as I miss that, I get that same release or whatever it is in other areas. So it's just changed. It's just different. So really learning to adapt with life and learn to letting go of that fear of what could happen or what might happen or what you think should happen. Let go of that, drop that weight, and just know and trust that it'll all work out. And who knows? It may even work out better. Because let me tell you, I'm telling you, the more I've come to realize, most of the time it does work out better. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. If you're holding on to perfectionism, ask yourself, what is it really giving you? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you let it go? Even just a little bit. All right, this week I challenge you to notice when perfectionism is creeping in. Maybe it's in how you talk to yourself. Maybe it's in how you approach a task. Maybe it's in how you judge your own progress. And instead of letting it control you, try shifting towards progress instead. Just take one step. Give yourself grace and remind yourself you are already enough. But if this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can always come find me on Instagram at lifestyle period refresh, and let's keep the conversation going. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it their way. Let's keep growing together. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.